Let's show you the back page of the Irish Independent this morning. It is a €5 million sponsor boost for the Dubs. Insurance giant extends deal to underline Blues pulling power, which I'm sure will cause a lot of ructions with people who kind of... I don't know, the anti-dub bias, I don't think it is anti-dub bias when you bring up actual figures like this, that I guess it's a 5-year deal with AIG. It's going to be €1 million per year, we understand. We never get the exact figures, but that is a general understanding. And you look at the second highest income when it comes to a yearly sponsorship deal, and it's Cork with Chill Insurance for 420 grand. So there's a huge disparity there, of course, when it comes to the population, and if it is going to grassroots Gaelic games, and it's all well and good, but the rich get richer, Dave.
It's a 25% hike on the last deal, which was signed in 2012, and that just shows where the brand, I know the economy is in a different place now in comparison to where it was in 2012, but it shows where Dublin's brand is in comparison to 2012, because they've since added another 4 All-Irelands on top of the one they won in their Pat Gilroy in 2011. You mentioned that we hope to have a couple of the Leitrim footballers who have jetted in from New York on the show before we sign off this morning. If the numbers are to be believed, their shirt sponsor is drawing about €20,000 a year. It beggars belief, the difference and the chasm between the haves and the have-nots, and it's only going to get worse. The next deal you suspect that Dublin sign will be a bigger one again, and there's no question that AIG are doing very well out of it from a PR point of view, which is why they're willing to place so much money into it. Now, it has to be said, it's not just the senior footballers that they sign up to. They are sponsoring the underage teams, they are sponsoring the women's teams in the county as well, so it's not just all let's get the jersey on the senior footballers, and it does allow Dublin's camogie teams and ladies football teams to enjoy the same sort of facilities and care that the men's teams are getting. But you just wonder how any team can possibly try and cope with that, as well as the fact that we talk about the player pool, the other resources they have, the fact that all of their players are probably no more than an hour max from training on a nightly basis. You throw it all in together and you can see why Dublin are so dominant. Yeah, it paints that dominant picture for sure, and I think it is just worth reiterating that point, that it is a symbiotic relationship. AIG are certainly enjoying this relationship they've had with Dublin over the last couple of years. We'll move on to the Irish Times back page. It is Rugby Central, Gordon Darcy's column leading the way. Leinster's leaders can see this campaign home. He talks about some of the mirror images really between this year's campaign and you talk about 2008 as well, just kind of beating English giants, Harlequins that year, Exeter this year, and of course blowing and taking the reigning champions apart when it comes to Munster and when it comes to the Saracens. So there's a lot of mirror images there that Gordon Darcy points out. It is rugby really dominating the way in the Irish Times, as you would expect it to do over the next couple of days. It is the big fixture on the Irish sporting calendar this weekend. We bring you the front page of the Irish Examiner sports section. They're leading with Mayo versus Galway. Locked and loaded. Kieran Shannon asked the question if Galway will bait Mayo, and he uses that word very carefully. That is the Galway slang right there. Can they bait Mayo? Well, we'll be chatting about it a little bit later on, and we'll hear from both camps before we go off air this morning. The Times Ireland edition then is going with rugby as well, but it's not Leinster, it is with Ulster, because there is a new twist in the Ulster coach standoff. So Gregor Townsend has gone on the record and says Dan McFarland is going nowhere before January, which is the last thing any Ulster fan wants to hear. They want a coach, they want it now, they want some sort of solidity in that camp, which has been in utter carnage over the past 8 months or so. And it seems that Dan McFarland, who is supposed to become their new director of rugby, is not going to be there for the start of the new season if Gregor Townsend is to be believed, but he's contracted until January and he's going to stay in Scotland until then. Yeah, I think overall money talks, and this is probably just some public sabre rattling from Gregor Townsend. I would imagine he's been instructed by the SRU to say such things. You would hope that's the case from an Ulster point of view, and that this is a problem that can be solved by just flinging a little bit of extra cash at it. If Townsend is true to his word and genuinely believes, and he is not being instructed by his employers to say these things publicly, genuinely believes that his contract is his contract and McFarland will be there until January, well, it's another absolute disaster from an Ulster point of view. McFarland needs to be in Ravenhill next month. This rebuilding process, and let's face it, it is a rebuilding process. They have to start from the very bottom, given where they're coming from at the moment. They still have a Champions Cup playoff that they have to win. This could get worse, a lot worse, before it gets better if they don't win their next game. But for McFarland not to be coming until January, that's essentially next season written off. What if whoever the interim head coach happens to be does a really good job and pulls up trees? Next of all, McFarland comes in and he just gets shunted aside and the whole thing is thrown into a little more uncertainty again. We've seen Munster handle that transitional period between two different coaches mid-season very well this season, but I would imagine they're the exception to the rule and not the norm, because...
Well, let's face it, that was a 3-4 week gap. This is going to be half a season.
Yeah.
So it is an absolute nightmare, and as you say...
And they had Erasmus in place.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were coachless for that time. Erasmus
Van
was not
Graan,
an interim head coach. So they knew that when Van Graan came in, there would be only a 4-week handover period, and they managed that period as best they could. Ulster are not in that position, and it's just another really difficult headline for Ulster rugby fans to stomach this morning on the back of what is essentially the biggest game they will play this season, or ahead of what's the biggest game they'll play this season. They lose that and they're gone.
Was it a similar situation with Les Kiss, that it took him a couple of months to actually get into the hot seat because of some sort of negotiations with the IRFU, if I recall correctly? I might look into that and bring that up.
Yeah, well, it certainly wasn't what they're going to have to deal with this
No.
time around if Scottish Rugby Union stick to their guns and refuse to let him leave but before January. But more often than not, these things are sorted by a little bit of extra wedge.
Let's show you the front page, or the back page rather, of the Irish News this morning. It is Ulster GAA all the way. Harte says sanction would be harsh. That's on the training regime, and the 10-day rule is silly, he says. Kavanagh in balance for Farney clash. So that's Colin Kavanagh, who may or may not be playing. His fitness is still under question marks. Also, we are Ulster contenders, declares Declan Bonner, and it's not exactly the biggest statement in the world. If you're the manager of Donegal, what is it, 6 years on from winning an All-Ireland, you better be saying you're Ulster contenders. Otherwise, that's a pretty defeatist attitude right away.
Yeah, if Declan Bonner's coming out publicly and saying, you know what, we've no chance of lifting the Anglo-Celt Cup in a few weeks' time, I don't think his players or his management team or the supporters up in Donegal would take to that too kindly. And they do have a difficult opener in Ballybuffet, although it's a place they haven't been beaten in the championship for the best part of 8 years. They are taking on a Cavan side that are now a Division 1 team, so that's certainly no gimme. But they get through that and they get into the competition proper, yeah, they have a chance. They don't have to take on Tyrone or Monaghan in their second game, so they should have a really good opportunity.
Absolutely they do. Let's show you the back page of the Racing Post this morning. They're going with tonight's game in the Premier League, which has actually turned out to be a huge fixture. It's Chelsea versus Huddersfield at 7:45, and the headline is everything to play for, which is literally the case. Stamford Bridge battle could have an impact at both ends of the table. Of course, Huddersfield only 3 points clear now at the bottom of the Premier League table, but they play Arsenal on Sunday. They've only got, I think, a 3-goal difference on the bottom three on Swansea, who play Stoke on Sunday, of course. So you'd imagine Chelsea, who are chasing top 4 and are really hot on the heels of Liverpool right now, are going to go gung-ho at Stamford Bridge tonight, probably win that game. Huddersfield then, they go back towards the goal difference, maybe 1 or 2 goals clear of Swansea. Swansea play Stoke, and Huddersfield play Arsenal in Arsene Wenger's last ever game. I don't know about you, but I'm looking at Huddersfield right now and I'm thinking you're going to get relegated.
Well, you wouldn't have them as favourites for relegation ahead of Swansea, surely.
I don't know. Like, I mean, there's also the pride thing with Stoke City, of course. But, like, it's going to be their last game in the Premier League for who knows. But I think Huddersfield are going down. I've just got this feeling that Swansea are going to do the business at the weekend.
Well, Swansea haven't scored in 4 games. They've got 2 in their last 9.
That's a problem, all right, yeah.
But they need to score in order to beat Stoke at the weekend. And having watched them last night, I don't know where those goals are going to come from. Although Tammy Abraham had a pretty good impact when he came off the bench and had 1 or 2 half chances. But if I would prefer to be in Huddersfield shoes, despite the fact that they have to play 2 of the more recognised sides in the Premier League, but they need a single point. And if you can't get a point at home to Arsenal, who have nothing to play for in your final game...
Well, they've got to play for the pride of Arsene Wenger.
They haven't shown much pride for Arsene Wenger in the last 2 or 3 years, have they, these players?
But Arsenal are the best club ever at kind of getting themselves up for something meaningless. And going to Huddersfield on the final day of the season is completely meaningless, and it will be so Arsenal for them to actually hammer them. I
agree that Huddersfield's position is precarious, but of the 2, I would prefer to be in Huddersfield's shoes.
Always take the points. Always take the points, as they say. What have you got? You're leading with the Herald, I think?
I'm going to start with the Herald. It's about Manchester United and Jose Mourinho looking for a swap deal, apparently. We are now getting into silly season in terms of the transfer window reopening and some of the transfer rumours that we'll have to stomach over the next few weeks and months. United boss wants to offload Martial and bring in Willian. His comments on Martial after the defeat to Brighton on Friday were pretty scathing, and he is a big fan of Willian, who probably hasn't seen as much game time in terms of the starting 11 for Chelsea this season as most people would have anticipated. And then another mention of the €5 million boost for the Dubs as AIG sign on for 5 more years. That is a lot of cash being in and around Dublin football. In the Mirror this morning, it's about Tottenham, actually. This is sort of one of the games we haven't really mentioned as being of large significance going into the final days of the Premier League season. Do or die, Pochettino urges his Spurs stars to give their all in their battle to make the Champions League and keep the club moving forward. They have a couple of home games and they just need to do the business to make sure they finish top four. But the money would be on Liverpool dropping out of the top four than Tottenham if things go the way Chelsea hope they go over the coming days.
What would your assessment of Spurs' season be? Like, it's not exactly, if you go back, whatever, 5 months or so, to how glorious it was looking. Say, if you take after the first leg of Juventus, things were looking pretty good at that point. Take it after Real Madrid in the group stage of the Champions League, things were looking amazing. And it's just kind of like, what is the exact step forward they've taken? Okay, beating Real Madrid is a step forward for sure, but what is the tangible thing here that in 12 months' time, when the Harry Kane and Dele Alli question and potentially the Christian Eriksen question comes up, because I think they've got 1 year of grace there, they've really got to do something big next year.
Well, they need to win at Wembley on Saturday week. If they win the FA Cup final, sorry, sure, they were beaten by Manchester United in the semi-final. So I'm in the camp whereby I feel Pochettino gets too much credit for what Tottenham have done over the last 3 or 4 years. Yes, they were brilliant in the Champions League this season, but when it really came to the crunch, they weren't able to get the job done. They were in a great position in the tie going into the last half an hour of that second leg against Juventus. Another massive game at Wembley against Manchester United, and despite taking the lead, they can't manage to hold on to that. So it's another big Wembley defeat. And for me, it's been a bang average season. They are no closer to winning the title than they were when they got to the closest point of it the year Leicester won the championship. And they're still in a position where they're worried about the future of the likes of Ali and Eriksen and Harry Kane. So I think Tottenham's season this season has not been good enough.
There's no chance they leave this summer, is there? I think they get 1 more year, personally. And then it's next summer, unless they've made some of the step forwards that we've just been talking about. I can just hear them saying, listen, first of all, about more money. And second of all, Harry Kane is a man of ambition. He's not a man of finance. And he's going to say, I actually want trophies more than anything.
Yeah, I think the 3 of those will be there next season. I think Harry Kane in particular will want to spend at least 1 season at the new White Hart Lane. After that, all bets are off, particularly if they don't pull up any trees next season. Plus, despite the fact that he hasn't won anything as a manager and he's at a club that hasn't won anything in 10 years, there are still calls for Pochettino to be signed up by some of the biggest clubs in Europe. If that continues, eventually he's going to leave. If he doesn't get a lot of money this summer to spend on new players, which I don't think he will because they have this stadium to pay for, there could be a lot of change in and around Tottenham in the next 9 to 12 months. Losing their biggest players, maybe losing their manager.
Like, in 12 months' time, you could be talking about Harry Kane leaving Spurs, you could be talking about Christian Eriksen leaving Spurs, Ali leaving Spurs, but also, as on the back of the Irish Daily Star this morning, Pep Guardiola potentially could be a transfer saga next summer.
Yeah, City sweat on Pep. He's being a bit coy as to whether or not he's going to put pen to paper on a new long-term deal at the Etihad Stadium. He's refusing to commit his long-term future to the Premier League champions. But again, maybe that's just the way you play the negotiating game. Don't tell people that you're desperate to stay, because that might just weaken your hand when it comes to the amount of zeros that might be on the end of your weekly pay packet. Sun Sport, bright spark. A lot of the talk in the build-up of the game last night was that Mark Hughes is going to make history and become the first Premier League manager to relegate 2 clubs in the same campaign. Well, he's managed to sidestep that landmine. Saints alive, Swans on the brink, and Baggies go down. So that win for Southampton last night relegates West Brom. It pretty much leaves it between Huddersfield and Swansea. Only an absolute cataclysmic turnaround this weekend will see Southampton get relegated. And Roos SA, I mean, it's a difficult one to get your head around, that particular.
It's not really.
Well,
it's Rooney going to America, so Roo SA.
Yeah, but it's the full. I don't think we need the full stops in there. And the other thing about the headline is he may not be able to pick it up on the camera. They have superimposed the stars and stripes onto the headline. So Roo SA, I'll give you that one. I'm just a bit slow on the uptake this morning. £12 million switch to DC United. Now, there was talk he was going to go to China. I don't think anyone ever really believed he would go to China before the Everton move. This is a little more up his street, I would have thought. I think culturally, I'm not sure Wayne Rooney would have been suited to the Chinese way of life.
That's our tab of the morning to you this morning, Roo SA.
Roo SA. It's getting better the more times I say it to myself. Guardian this morning is the final one for me. Obviously, the big story is Gabbiadini's winner against Swansea last night. Manolo Gabbiadini coming off the bench. A lot of credit to Mark Hughes for that. We might mention it later, but they had to make a change at the back. They lost their Polish central defender, Bednarek, and he opted to bring Manolo Gabbiadini on, which meant he had 3 centre forwards on the pitch, and Shane Long as well, and Charlie Austin could easily just brought a defender on, and he pops up and gets the winner. And exclusive former Chelsea players come forward to back racism claim. 2 white members of the club's 80s youth setup have spoken out in support of allegations that the coach Gwyn Williams was guilty of horrific racial abuse. Just the latest instalment on that story that Daniel Taylor is compiling this week in The Guardian.
Yeah, before we get into kind of more on the football and more on Stoke, the big news really this morning and the big news over the last 24 hours is that these guys are back. The Underdogs are making their return to Irish television. TG Cahir are bringing it out of the grave and bringing it back to our screens, which is something we've all desperately wanted since I think it was 2004 was the last season of the Underdogs, when we had the likes of Kieran Donaghy, who almost made his name there. There he is, wearing the Kerry jersey rather than the Underdogs jersey at that point. They're looking for participants. So, Dave, if you've got any friends out in Castleknock who haven't quite made the grade with Dublin, but you feel that they've got a bit of vengeance in their hearts and want to play, this is the team from 2004. So you've got the Underdogs versus Kerry, and you look at that Kerry team, and it's actually a very, very strong team. You obviously have the Gooch in there, you've got Owen Brosnan in there, you've got Sean O'Sullivan in there, Tom O'Sullivan in there, Diarmuid Murphy in goals, Paul Greedy. That is no Kerry team just thrown out to make up the numbers. Mark O'Shea off the bench, Dennis Dwyer, I think that might be there as well, even though it's 2004. And that Underdogs team, if you look through that, a couple of names there which will stick out. Pierce O'Neill, another one, not just Kieran Donaghy. Despite the fact that Kieran Donaghy is spelled with a K, not a C, whoever wrote that in the Underdogs there. Other than that, I'm not quite sure. Oh, Owen Bradley.
You've got Owen Bradley, you've got Paul Brady from Cavan,
of course,
the world handball champion who spent several seasons playing senior football for Cavan. That's about it, though, isn't it? Looking through them, I don't see anybody else that stands out. Stephen Wallace, the Offaly manager, that's one of the same.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to look forward any further than our producer's box if we're looking for a candidate potentially for the new Underdog series. Because
he's literally pointing to himself in the box right now saying, pick me, pick me, pick me. His name is Tommy Rooney, Underdogs producers, and I'll send you your email if you just drop me a DM on Twitter. It's like, this is the greatest nostalgia week ever. You've got Mark Williams winning the World Snooker Championship. You've got the Underdogs back, all in the space of like 48 hours. I feel like I'm whatever age I was again. It's amazing.
But you were a child when the Underdogs
had this conversation. Did you watch the snooker at the weekend, actually?
I
wanted to get your take on this.
watched 2 frames of the entire championship and then I fell asleep. So I think I watched Higgins make it 15-14, and just as it was reaching its pinnacle and its zenith in terms of the tension and the drama, I decided I'd seen enough.
Why would you do that? I mean, like,
well, it's a simple answer. Regardless of what happened in the snooker, I was up at 6 a.m. no matter who was around, because I'm generally up at that hour anyhow, because that's when the lads awake. So there's a reason for me going to bed, no matter how dramatic the sporting events may be. There's very few events that will keep me awake on a Sunday night now, bar the Masters, for example.
What about Red Zone in the NFL? Like, that's something that's kind of like...
No, won't even stay up for the Super Bowl anymore.
Super Bowl's way later. Red Zone's at 6 o'clock. It's perfect, unless you've got...
Yeah, well, like 6 in the evening, so that's not a problem. I'm talking once you get past the witching hour of 9 p.m, that's where I really have to start making some very difficult, life-changing decisions. And of all the World Snooker Championships in the last decade, this was the one I should have been watching, because they were 2 of my favourite players, 2 of the old stagers. I would have far more vivid memories of you, I suggest, of Mark Williams winning the World Championship. I remember vividly Higgins winning his in '98, for the first of his 4 world titles. And for him to come back and 15 years after his last win and pick up a 3rd championship, it's an astonishing story. But I watched 2 frames of the entire 2 weeks.
We just got a message in here from Vincent Dolan, who says it wasn't Paul Brady, it was his brother Philip. Thanks for that, Vincent.
Right, there you go.
So we're like, that would be one of the great stories where, you know, reality TV show come world champion in handball. But thanks for putting us on the right track.
I made a very big assumption there, seeing P. Brady and brackets Cavan after.
There can only be one P. Brady from Cavan, surely, Dave.